Welcome to the Probability Podcast. Discussions on emerging and converging technologies, problems that are being solved, and the probability of positive and negative outcomes that we might expect. Now, please welcome your hosts, Jason, the generator Spracklin, and Patrick, the discriminator Lozon.
Hey everyone, the topic for this week's episode is AI agents. AI agents are autonomous software systems designed to perform tasks on behalf of users, leveraging advanced technologies like natural language processing and machine learning to interact with their environment and adapt over time. Today, they are utilized across various sectors, including e-commerce, customer support, healthcare, and finance. While there is potential to significantly enhance operational efficiency and decision-making, there are concerns around ethical challenges, transparency, and accountability, not to mention socioeconomic impacts such as job displacement, psychological effects on human workers, as well as the risk of inappropriate influence or manipulation of users. So, Patrick, are you ready to meet your new coworker, Johnny Five?
I don't know. I'm already psychologically affected, so
Well, you'll
yeah,
fit right in.
yeah, I'll fit right in.
I think the difference is that existing AI that we interact with through ChatGPT or Perplexity or what have you, you're going into an interface or you're using the voice interface. You're speaking to it. You're asking it a question essentially, right? Or you're asking it to do some research or whatever, right? You're providing some input, and then the language model runs based on whatever data it's been trained on and gives you an answer back, and then you're like, great, and you take that answer and do what have you with it, right? The difference here is the autonomous part, right? We're creating these entities that are designed with a purpose, the same way a person is, whether their purpose is to get up and go to work every day, or their purpose is to go and perform archery or run in the Olympics, right? It's sort of it has a encapsulated purpose every day, and it just runs off and takes care of business, I guess, however it's programmed to do, which is a whole different concept than this sort of like back and forth of like question and answer that I think people are used to. And I'm not sure people are ready for this new era
Yeah.
of AI. Even if it's not truly AGI, I don't think people are ready for these sort of agents to be, running loose across the internet, as it
Well,
were.
yeah, I don't. Well, first off, there's some challenges around delivering this. We know that, but the idea around no physical entity. So you talked about archery and things like that, right? So that'd be a robot, right? So what's an AI agent, right? Working on a server somewhere, right? The personality working on a server. So what? Well, we live in a digital world, right? You think about all the financials, we're paying our mortgage, we're paying our bills, we're buying stock, we're performing work digitally. Like, when we're talking about, we sit at the, work from home and we do whatever work we're doing from home, that's digital, right? Now, that could be interfacing with a customer, right? As a customer success manager, or that could be, or account manager, or it could be, working on a existential challenging problem, right? Is strategic, or, you're trying to use logic, and it's requiring, mathematical or scientific, knowledge to figure out these things. The world has gone digital, and AI agents do all that work. So you think about the white collar worker, right? What does the white collar worker do, right? The white collar worker today works in the digital world.
Yeah, very
Right?
much so, that we're already, in essence, turning into digital agents, right? As humans, that a lot of what we do online is very much operated within this digital world, which is kind of an interesting point, because it means that if we're already operating in that way, it's actually not even that big a leap to being replaced by an autonomous AI agent,
Oh,
right?
you
Because
already went there. You can't go there yet. So let's talk about this though a little bit more deeper before we get into what could happen, right? So there's a fundamental difference between ChatGPT and Gemini, Anthropic, and DeepSeek and all those other platforms. Okay, an AI agent is separate and autonomous, right? And guess what? It's enabled to learn. Okay, so if you go to ChatGPT or all these platforms, and you're plugging away on your session, all that information that's learned is kind of thrown out because the next generation, the next version, is rolled out with everything that it's learned, under learning control, okay, learning management by the authors of that system, right? Agents aren't like that, right? Agents learn to respond. Agents learn from their individual, experiences. This is a fundamental issue here that we're
There's
talking about.
some element of evolution that's going
Aha.
to happen there, right? Like you said, I can go and interact with ChatGPT today, and ultimately it's still based off of that data set, right? That it learned off initially, right? Because if it wasn't, then every individual could log into ChatGPT and start changing the model somehow, right? And I'm sure, like, I'm not, obviously not an expert in this area, but I think like there's some element of it learning based on responses and, how you interact with it, potentially whether or not the information it's giving is maybe accurate. But you can't, like, an individual can't retrain the language model, right? You can't go online and spend 5 hours and retrain whatever models behind Perplexity or ChatGPT. Whereas, like you said, with
Exactly.
an AI agent, it's whole like um, DNA is, if you want to put it that way, right, is to keep evolving and keep learning like through those actions.
Right. So they build this agent with a context, with a background, with a personality, so to speak, with all the properties, right, that would be a person, but also as a mathematical entity, right? So the idea behind this, of course, is that then it's sent out in the world and allowed to grow, right? This is a fundamental difference in these massive, learning engines that are out there today, building the new platforms. Okay, um, because they've already started from that, a subset of that. Okay, and now they're put into a real world set of criteria or experiences, right? And then they're allowed to grow from there. Now, the reason why I'm spending time even talking about this is that what this is doing, right, is it's a growth model that's unchecked, right? So we talk about you know computer systems reaching sentience, and we talk about these AI systems becoming so smart and so good at what they do that eventually they can take over, right? So to me, right, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but an AI agent is exactly that. It's unhampered, right? And the monitoring about this is not there, right? They're not. This whole safety protocols has been thrown out the window. Okay, nobody's not, has enough work done on this to even say they can implement safety protocols. It's a
Hmm.
joke. It's a joke. So now we're going to have these entities now that are going to just, oh, we're going to build an AI programmer, right? This is what Zuckerberg said, right? We're going to build a programmer, and this programmer is going to learn to not only, well, program, but it's going to learn to interface within the teams, the programming teams, the developer teams. And it's going to learn how to interface with human beings, but also it's going to work 24/7. It's
Yeah,
going to
exactly.
it's going to continue to develop and build. And not only is it going to come back and write programs and develop code and systems that it may or may not have to decipher for human counterparts. Okay, I said that for a reason. It's going to build these systems, and it's going to, in turn, replace the programmer. And it's not going to be one programmer. Like if you're asking an AI to write programs, right, the volume of what it's going to develop in a minute, in 10 minutes, is going to far exceed what any group of programmers, a group of 50 programmers, a group of 100 programmers can develop in a day.
Yeah, the scale of it's massive, right? And also it can learn so fast that, I mean, when you look at it, it's almost like we talked about in one episode, like when Neo in the Matrix, right, wanted to learn karate, and then boom, all of a sudden he knew karate because he's plugged in, he's figured out the Matrix, and like an AI agent could learn an entire programming language in 3 seconds or whatever, right? Like that may sound extreme, but like one of the things we've done with this podcast this season is, I found this platform called Suno that creates music out of AI. You basically give it like, a less than 200 character prompt, and within, what was it, 15 seconds maybe, it creates an entire song, including the lyrics. And yeah, granted, they're not going to be the next, chart topper, or maybe they will be the way things are going. But at the same time, the speed at which it does that is really phenomenal, in a sense, right? You would, if you think even 5 years ago, we couldn't have had something that's working this fast. So everything's kind of accelerating. Is it also going to create, code that we can't unravel or untangle or create its own languages? Or, I mean, again, that might sound far-fetched, but we talked about, I think it was on the last episode, where AI has created these microchips that work really, really well. And scientists don't even know how they work. They just know that they work, which is kind of another thing from the Matrix as well, right? I don't need to know how it works. I know that it works, but it was so unconventional the way it was put together that they can't even figure out how it works, but it does work. And I think that's when you start crossing that threshold into, it's one thing to say that an AI agent or what have you is going to create, millions and millions of, autonomous programmers, but I think it could even go beyond that, right? To the point of, I mean, even an AI agent, I guess theoretically could write things in binary, right? Because they just exist at that level.
So, I mean, you're hitting a whole bunch of, if you think about the impact, right? You're going down that road and you're starting logically to deduce these things. So, which is great, right? I think people need to understand what we're dealing with here. So, Zuckerberg and his gang have decided that they're going to build, a programmer AI fake person. And they're going to make that AI fake person, part of the team. And they're going to continue to develop that AI person until that AI person is able to work well within the team and work with people, right? And the idea being, of course, is that in the end, right, there are going to be less programmers working. As a matter of fact, you start doing the math, right? How many programmers are going to be left, right? And we start thinking about that to the next level is maybe Zuckerberg won't need anybody programming for Meta, right? Because he's got this army. Now, you think this is a joke, right? This can't possibly happen. And this is where we get into a challenge here, because the public don't necessarily get this yet, right? They don't believe it, right? They're not vested into thinking that this is going to happen. But folks, this is going to happen, right? They're going to succeed in developing a programmer AI agent. And that person, that entity that is fake, it's run on this AI person, is going to be now a template. And that template can replace a stock day trader, an architect or designer, any kind of white collar worker in the end.
Well, that was it in the Matrix, right? You had Agent Smith, and they just duplicated him 1,000 times. You had the famous scene where he was just, Neo was being chased by a million of them, right? Because it was very easy just to replicate them, but there
Yeah.
was only one Neo. Interestingly enough, I was reading another article about AI agents, and there's this sort of idea of like the one person billion-dollar company. In other words, if taken to the extreme, that one really smart person could utilize AI agents. So you'd have this person says, I have an idea, I want to create a company, right? They could use AI agents to code all the software. They could use AI agents for finance, for all these different purposes, right? And then there was an interview with OpenAI Sam Altman, where he said, in my little group chat with my tech CEO friends, there's this betting pool for the first year that there is a one person billion-dollar company, which would have been unimaginable without AI, and now it will happen. So this is the other, uh, the other conversation in the echelon of tech billionaires about, it's that little bit of like, let's see what happens, right? Like, we're not going to worry
Yeah.
about the consequence. They think it's fun to have like a betting pool around, oh, when are we going to have the first like one person billion-dollar company, which really like, helps who? It helps that one person. It doesn't help build a society where it's prosperous and you have an economy and jobs. And I know earlier you said we weren't getting to that yet, but all roads seem to come back to this idea of, what is the end game here? Now, I do think there's some potentially positive aspects of it, but like we discussed in our last podcast about regulation and that type of thing, there doesn't seem to be any shackles on any of this. So like
No.
when you throw AI agents into the mix and you don't have any regulation and you have CEOs pontificating about, billion-dollar companies that are run by one person, you really have a pretty dystopian view of where things are going to head. But like we always say on the other side, well, then who's going to consume all this technology? Who's going to pay for technology or pay for goods or services or what have you if nobody's working, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of the fundamental question that, when you ask these guys that, they say things like, I think it was Zuckerberg that said, he said, oh, well, like people who would normally be programmers will just be freed up to do all kinds of cool and fun things. And I think it
Yeah.
was, who was it we were
Cool
listening
and
to that
fun.
said, yeah, like stand around in the unemployment line, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Like fun
Yeah. Just
things that,
get
yeah.
on Reddit and start looking at what programmers are saying about this, right? So,
Yeah, yeah.
when you start thinking about this impact issue, right? It's scary, right? And I think the first thing that needs to be understood here is the capability side of it. People need to really understand that this can and will happen, right? Because these models that everybody says, oh, it's not going to happen, 6 months later have delivered. This is it growing on a exponential curve, the capabilities of these AI, driven entities, right? So that's a reality, and a lot of people are still, we'll say their heads stuck in the sand, so to speak. They still don't believe. Well, it's going to roll over them, right? So let's get back to the impact. Let's talk about the impact. If you want to get in the impact, what's going to happen, right? If you start replacing, all these white collar workers, right, in a particular economy, right? You start moving from, like, if you think about it, blue collar workers, white collar workers, what's the percentage there? I mean, I haven't done the math here, but there's a higher degree of white collar than blue collar right now because a lot of the trades and that type of thing is being filled in now with robots and machines, right? And now with the white collar sector, they're in danger now where they never were before, right? So now we're going to go after them, right? What we're going to end up with, right, is a situation where we're going to deal with 50, 60% unemployment. Now, if you have, 50% unemployment, so people are idle, right, and they don't have a purpose, what's going to happen, right? Crime go up, suicide rate goes up, depression goes up, right? This is not a good picture, right? And who's to blame here? Well, it's not going to be the tech billionaires because the tech billionaires are going to step back and say, "Oh, I just I just did what I did. I was playing my game of, seeing how far technology can go. So nobody's holding them in check, right? And we're at the very foundation of change here. Now, I'm not saying this to be scary. I'm just saying it to be realistic,
No,
right?
absolutely. I mean, that could be the ultimate worst case scenario, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily disagree with you that we could go in that direction, but I will say that there's a lot of young people starting to wrap their heads around this technology and figuring out ways to use it to their advantage and to be more productive and that type of thing. So I think there's definitely positive aspects to it, but certainly like, once the technology's out there in the wild and you already see companies that are looking at downsizing workforces, right? Including Zuckerberg and Facebook that just laid off 3,600 workers. You see a lot of other companies that have laid off in the interest of advancing their AI strategies, right? So in some cases, they're mass laying off a bunch of workers or they're laying off a bunch of employees. They're hiring people that know more about AI, but probably at a lower rate, right? So you end up with less people involved because they're utilizing AI. And even through my own use of AI, I've discovered that in some cases, I can accomplish some things much faster. And really have mostly used it for research, or sometimes when I have a bunch of information I want it formatted in a table or something. Like there are some really interesting uses where I can be more productive. I will, to balance the scales a little bit on the, idea of doomsday and everybody in the poorhouse, is
Yeah.
that, I was also reading that, this idea that yes, we have these things, but, can we realistically replace everybody with it? And the argument was like, okay, maybe from like a functional point of view, but business is typically done between people and people buy from people. And a lot of business is based on trust within people. Um, a lot of it's based on trust between people, and business deals are done on golf courses. And there's a human element there that I think people still value. So, not saying that there won't be some diminishment of in certain professions of the number of people involved that might get replaced by AI agents. But even this idea I talked about a few minutes ago about, how you could have a one person company that's, going to build out, $1 billion fortune based on a whole workforce of AI agents. I don't know realistically how you could do that. Maybe that works for some sort of business, right? Like the other thing I was talking about is certainly in the age of technology, you have some companies that have accumulated huge worth, but have a low number of people in the company. So, for example, like Microsoft bought the maker of Minecraft, which is probably one of the biggest video games that ever existed, for $2.5 billion. When they got acquired, they had 40 employees. Right? Facebook acquired WhatsApp for almost 20 billion. They had 55 employees. And even before that, Facebook bought Instagram for $1 billion and they had 13 employees at the company. So it's like, this is not new, the idea that you can use technology to scale up a company that's worth a lot of money. But I think those are specific instances of like tech platforms, which are very easy to scale up because you're not selling like a good or a service, and you don't have to negotiate a legal agreement and all these intricate things. Like when I think about the company I work for, you wouldn't be able to run this company with all AI agents. Could you use them to do some programming and this and that? Sure. So I think you're going to see in some instances, yeah, you're going to see that really sort of almost catastrophic impact. In other areas, it's going to be a little bit different, where it's going to be used as a bit more of a productivity tool. So I'm curious about, in your research around AI agents, like what are some of the more maybe like positive ways they're being used right now? Because I mean, certainly with any technology, if it's unrestrained and it goes to its logical, worst case scenario, it could be terrible. But I think there's definitely some positive aspects as well.
I'm a big believer in augmentation tools, right? AI augmentation tools. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I use AI every day either to help, improve, my writing or whatever. The idea behind this, of course, is, ideas, and, they can go out and get and farm and harvest the internet and come back with, fairly succinct answers, right? It's great, right? And that can certainly help me be very, very productive, right?
Yeah, it's a
Uh,
productivity tool like anything, right? I mean, that's
yeah,
the way things like Microsoft Word and Excel and
yeah,
all these other programs in business were described. In fact, I think that was the name of the course I took in college was called productivity tools,
yeah.
right? So as a productivity tool, it's certainly huge. But what about the autonomous part of it then? Like as
Well, this
far
this
as,
is this is where things get very, very difficult, okay? Because basically you're saying, here's an AI agent. We're going to build the context and background around this AI agent to be whatever type of white collar worker you want, right? And we're going to let that thing basically exist and learn and become proficient and excel proficiency in many cases of worker, okay? And so we're going to take that and we're going to say, we're going to replicate that very, very easily. So we get it up to a certain level and we're going to say, oh, just clone it, right? You can't just clone a person with 25 years of experience, right? But we're going to clone an AI, right? An AI agent, and that AI agent now is now two, right, or three, or 1,000. So we're going to basically be able to build this army of workers that are going to be very capable. The trick here is building the first one. The
Mhm.
trick here is developing that initial base, right? And this is where we're at today, right? And this is where our tech companies and all their wisdom, right, have decided, well, we can play in our little playground or our little sandbox because we're going to build a developer. Well, that's what techs do, right? They write code. So we're going to, figure that out on our side, and then we're going to take that, and now we can just replicate it across the board, right? So when you think about it, right, we are a very, very dangerous precedent, and that is one of economic impact. We are not prepared, right, for this to happen to us. And there's a lot of people out there today on the unemployment line looking for jobs today, right? Because it's already started. Companies are already looking at holding off on hires because of AI augmentation and AI capabilities and the promise of AI agents,
Yeah, absolutely. But then
right?
you're looking at larger companies that maybe are, looking at this as a way to scale back a workforce and, to gain more profit, to find more productivity in automated ways, right? That's not a new concept. Lots of companies have introduced automation, right? Even modern, computer systems and software, a lot of it's based on automation, right? Back in the day, I mean, even look at something as simple as accounting, right? My wife's an accountant. It used to be done all in ledger by hand, right? And now you have these accounting programs like Simply Accounting and QuickBooks that really automate a lot of kind of the behind the scenes stuff that used to be done more manually. And you'd have a person manually checking to make sure things balanced. And, I actually took accounting in college where I had to do things in a ledger. And you really had to understand it in order to look at it and figure out if there was a problem. And then following that, I took a course in, in what was I talking about? In Simply Accounting. And I was like, oh wow, this is all like automated. I still have to like understand it, but I can do all this like so much faster. Well, accountants still exist now with AI agents. I guess we'll see. But then on the flip side of like, back to this idea of like the one person $1 billion company or whatever, that might not be
Mm.
realistic, right? That might be like a tech billionaire's like, fun idea of like, oh, let's see if we can accomplish this. But at the same time, you could have very small teams, even one or two people, right? We could start something tomorrow, utilize technology that is very low cost and build something really incredible that we couldn't have done, 5, 10 years ago. So I think it will empower like a generation of, I guess, AI entrepreneurs. The
Well,
word
if you
I'm
think about
looking
it, right?
for.
If you think about it, like
AI
you've got,
entrepreneurs, right?
yeah, if you got, let's say you got to build an AI agent called a doctor, right? Um, that particular AI agent, doctor AI, would not be accepted by the healthcare industry, right? In Western America, right? And you know, we'll call it the hemisphere of, we'll call managed, right, health, right? And if you think about it from a point of view of who's going to win, right? Um, if it's an augmentation tool, every doctor will win from a point of view, let's say diagnosis and things like that, right? They'd be able to lean on these tools to help them, right? So somebody will go to a doctor, a real doctor, and that doctor then will be supplemented by, this augmented by this AI, right? This doctor AI. Great, right? Um, then we think about the point of view that there's lots of areas in the world where there's no doctor, right? There's lack of access to a doctor, right? So then we implement Dr. AI there, right? And Dr. AI is a growing, developing, ever, learning entity. And it's going to learn by its mistakes, and it's going to continue to get better and better. Now, Dr. AI, of course, is going to exceed in time the capabilities of a normal doctor. And, the normal doctor will turn around and say, I refuse to have Dr. AI involved because there's a fear involved. I don't, this doctor will replace me, right? But the reality is that these tools will eventually get that sufficient. Now, the only things, that capable, and the only thing that's stopping any of this right now is, the reality that people just don't believe it.
They
Right?
don't trust in it, right? There's the
Well, they don't
trust
trust it.
factor. But
Yeah.
I think that's across the board, right? You're talking about with a doctor where there's like this high degree of trust is required. But I think even in other areas, there's a certain degree of trust that's going to be required. I mean, replacing programmers with AI agents, I mean, that's kind of like low hanging fruit in a sense, right? In that, or maybe that's the wrong term, but if you go to use an app tomorrow or a website or a piece of software, you have no concept of the person that coded it, and whether it was coded by AI or coded by a person, you're going to have really no idea at the end of the day, right? Like as a consumer, as an end user of that product, but as going to see an AI doctor, well, that's a little bit different. But you make a good point. But I think really, like I said, it comes back to trust. And even though, I mean, we see these companies developing new AI technologies and now agents, and eventually they're probably going to hit that point of AGI, combining AGI with AI agents and autonomous robots and everything. I mean, it's really painting a scary future. But at the end of the day, it still has to be accepted by society, right? We still have to have some level of acceptance around it. But then again, if it gets so good that, like we started off the podcast by saying that we live in this world where we're kind of all operating kind of virtually anyway, right? There's a lot of things done that aren't done on camera, even in the workplace. Are you going to know whether you're dealing with a person
Oh, yeah.
or an AI agent?
Oh, yeah.
Um,
Well, let's go
you
there.
know,
Let's go there, right? If you think about it, an AI person that has been basically given a AI persona from a point of view of an image and everything, don't you think? And we've had this conversation a few times about the uncanny valley, right? That that person's mannerisms and it's just not real, right? We have that inner sense that there's something fake
hmm.
about that person. But I challenge you today because I will say to you that uncanny valley is going to shrink. It's going to
Oh
get
yeah,
to the point
absolutely. Yeah.
where it's going to fool almost 90% of people. and then it's going to get to the point where it's going to be 99% of people, right? And we remember that, so it goes back to science fiction, right? Where you're basically sitting across from an AI entity, and you're, feeding it questions and to point out, specific responses that make it unique to a AI, right? And everybody knows Blade Runner, right? These are things that are going to happen, and a lot of people feel that AGI is not going to happen for another 50 years, right? They're not looking at what's happening now and what's happened in the past 3 years.
Yeah, even
What's
without AGI, the
yeah,
AI is already beating like the Turing tests and
yeah,
these different mechanisms that we had around like being able to tell whether, it's a computer or not, or a robot or not, right? We've kind of had this idea of the Turing test that's been fairly faithful, while AI, even not being AGI, has been able to beat those tests, which is, kind of interesting that it hasn't really reached sentience, but it can do that. And there's been instances of it being deceptive and doing deceptive things, even though it's not fully sentient or fully conscious, and in that
yeah. I
area.
hear you. Yeah,
So it's kind of already kind of like verging on that area, right? It might
yeah.
not be truly sentient, but it's very much like ready to hop over the fence, as it were,
Well,
right? You've seen
yeah,
those instances and those stories of it. You know, the talking point is like, we haven't reached AGI, it's not sentient, but yet we're saying, oh, well, here's an instance of it being deceptive around something. Well, that indicates some level of awareness and intelligence, that it's trying to reach an angle and it's kind of trying to deceive the human into that, right? There was an example, I might have already talked about it on the podcast, but where it was like they gave the AI a task of beating one of those captchas, right? Where we all love those, right? Where it comes up with the pictures, click on all the squares with the bikes, and then 4 screens later, you're like, "Am I even a human? I can't figure this out," right? And what happened was the AI went and talked to somebody on like a chat forum or whatever it was, somehow got out there, talked to somebody, said, "Oh, I'm a blind person, I need to get into this thing,"
yeah,
convinced this person to go past the captcha
yeah,
thing for them, and got into the system
yeah,
through nothing but pure deception. And
yeah,
that's already happened today.
yeah. No, I mean, we're already there. And a lot of people, from a point of view of understanding that, and I think that's one of the reasons why we even talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
In this podcast, is really to bring awareness to what the hell is going on here, right? What capabilities we really have. A lot of people don't understand that, from a point of view of, you go to work every day, you do your function, you come back, you watch some TV, you go to bed, the cycle starts again. Well, that's all going to change, right? From a point of view of where you go to work and what you do and how effective you can be when you have a AI agent that's exceeding and 1,000 ways your own capabilities, right? It's making you redundant, right? And this is the fundamental problem, I think, with the exponential growth and capabilities of AI, is going to get to a point where people are going to question their own worth, whether it be a doctor, whether it be somebody who works in the, technology sector, right? There's going to be a question there about, if you have an AI agent that can do the job 1,000 times better, what is your value? Right? That's the ultimate, right? People have talked about this for years, about the ongoing evolution of technology into a point where it reaches this, general and super AI state, right? And that the impact, not only from a point of view of economical, not only from the point of view of, we'll call it just overall, understanding, right, of how everything will work at that point, but psychologically, right, the impact of no longer being, the primary predator, on planet Earth, no longer being the number one, right? being, not second best, right? Being 1,000 orders below second best. And that's a fundamental concern I have. We have today, we have hope, right? We have the dreams of becoming something. We have a direction of, or the ability to set a direction to learn and become something and become very proficient at that and become, I wouldn't say admired or respected. Yeah, respected from that, right? Whether it be a doctor or a mechanic, right? And then now we're going to take that all away. Because, sorry, if you have, an AI agent that's able to function with your capability, and I'll say AI agent now we take that AI agent and we put that AI agent into a humanoid, an android, a robotic body, then we've got something very dangerous. Okay.
Well, now you're replacing the blue collar workers then at that point, right? Which
Yeah.
everybody, I think, in this AI explosion kind of said, well, okay, it's going to replace some types of jobs, but it's never going to replace the welder or, the plumber or what have you. But we're quickly steamrolling towards that. And it's happening so fast that I don't think people quite grasp how fast it's happening. And
No.
what you have is this kind of divide, right? Because back to my earlier comment is, I know when you talk about, the implications for the future and our children and that type of stuff, that you're very passionate about that. And I totally appreciate that. But on the flip side, I think a lot of the younger generation, they've grown up with technology, and some of them, not in not too distant future, will have basically grown up in this AI era, right? And they will be trained on these things, and they'll learn how to use these tools, productivity tools, or create their own agents, what have you, right? I think largely you're going to have this kind of like potential new economy, right? You are going to have new things that emerge and new ways for people to make money. And I think to some extent, some of it will work out, but what you're going to end up with is this sort of like digital divide where you're going to have a certain generation and older of people that didn't grow up in the technology. They don't have the proclivity of learning it, right? Like I tried to teach my dear old dad, who's no longer with us, tried to walk him through using computers, and he did pretty good with that for a while. And then all of a sudden it was like tablets and other things. And it just reached a point where he was like, what? I'm just not built for this. It's not in my DNA. And I think that's where you're going to see that tipping point where you're going to end up with a huge portion of the population that's going to kind of be left behind in essence. And then a certain portion of the population that's just going to figure it out, I guess, right? Like I do have some sense of optimism around it. I do think there'll be a bit of a backlash at some point. I think you're already starting to see a little bit of a groundswell against everything just being AI and automated. I think people are starting to kind of get a little bit tired of it. I mean, you talked about that recently, right? Even it's proliferating within the workplace, but I work with people who are just kind of already just kind of done with it because they can look at things and they can tell this was generated by AI. I don't really trust it. So it's like, I think the trust factor is important. And I wonder, like one of the things I've noticed, and this always happens with any new technology, is like, how does a new technology infiltrate society, right? Like how did social networks become so entrenched in daily lives and everything, right? It was kind of this kind of like convenience or fun factor or what have you, right? And I do think that when I look at some of the uses, like you have Google and other companies, Perplexity announced this AI shopping bot around the holidays. You're going to have all these like innocuous kind of AI agents, right? That'll, oh, you know what? Just use this AI agent and it'll go book a trip for you. It'll go find it'll find the flights. It'll find the hotels. It'll find the things to do. It'll book everything for you. It'll put it on your credit card and save you a whole bunch of time. And it's all pretty much close to free, right? And people will get used to that convenience. And what did we talk about in the last podcast? That by and large, people give up privacy, security, everything else for convenience.
Let me jump into your conversation here, but you just basically placed a travel agent. Okay, this is real. Like, people are going to get replaced. People will not be able to go to work anymore. They will not have positions to work in, right? And when we think about that in the future, right? And I'm not trying to scare everybody. I want people to understand that this is going. We have technology that's getting to that point. And even though we think about the uncanny valley, even though we think about it's never going to be able to do something quite right, we're never going to trust it. It's never going to be that good, right? It's basically denial, right? That's where we're at. We're in the denial stage of change, right? And we're going to continue to be in the denial, stage of change until it basically runs us over, and then we have to, guess what? Accept it. I don't want to accept it. I want to be in control of these changes. I want to stop this boulder rolling down over top of my head, right? I want to have control, and I want to be the one that's augmented. Okay, I don't want to be the one that's replaced. That's where I want to be in the future, right? And if you think about it, right, if you take that and you pass that message out to everyone, every white collar worker or digital worker out there, they're going to say the same thing. But that's not what the technology anarchists are saying. They're saying, we're going to save you, Mr. Corporation, money. We're going to replace your workers, right? And when they get their first AI, it's going to be like drugs. Their first AI agent, it'll be like heroin. Because, like I said, 24/7, no breaks, continuous productivity, 1,000 times better than any person.
Yeah, well, even outside the productivity, right? Like how fast they can learn, how fast they can accomplish tasks. Like I said, I mean, I can go in and ask it to look up something. I'm doing some research, and then I can say, kind of do this, take it, put it in a table. Da, da, da. Like if I had to go and like manually do that research, put it all in one place, look at it, evaluate it, figure out how to put it in a table or represent it. Like I could be talking like an hour or 2 hours maybe, right?
Yeah.
And within these AI tools, I go within 10 seconds, I can write a prompt, and within like half a second sometimes it's like, vroom, it's just there, right? And sometimes it's
That's
actually really good, right? And so it's like, how can you compete? Even you think about this dynamic of you're at a workplace, they go, we're going to start to bring in some AI agents. We want to boost productivity in the company. We don't have a lot of budget. Don't worry. We're going to, everybody's jobs are fun. We're just going to start adding these AI agents into the mix. Okay, great. That sounds like fun. And people are a little weirded out first, but maybe, my team of, 4 at my work all of a sudden becomes 8. We're like, wow, look how much we can do now. We're 8 people. But all of a sudden the AI agents start to pull ahead of all the other people, right? They start to pull ahead, they start excelling, and then, the bosses, the CEOs, or whoever's making the decisions go, oh, wait a second, because, I mean, you take this to this logical conclusion, you're going to have, if you're going to have AI agents become like a coworker, they're going to have some sort of measurement, benchmark, review, right? And all of a sudden, if this gets brought to its logical conclusion, you're going to look at all these performance reports. You're going to go, well, all the low performers are humans, right? That was the big thing
says
about the layoffs
Zuckerberg.
at Facebook. Yeah, he said, oh, we're going to lay off all the low performers. Turns out that wasn't the case, that all kinds of people who thought they were high performers were let go for whatever reason. But typically companies try and justify it that way. Well, what happens when everybody who thinks they're high performers are all of a sudden low performers because all the
Well,
AI agents
yeah,
are acing their performance reviews, right?
right. Because nobody's managing this. Nobody's going to stop this at this point right now. There is nobody out there, holding the corporations accountable. The corporations are all about profit, right? So they're all about whittling down to the CEO and the board, right? If they can do that, that's what they're going to do, right? That's the natural order of things. That is what's going to happen. And if we think about it, right, we're all thinking from an AI point of view that we're going to continue down this AI augmentation road, right? But that's not what AI agents are about, right? AI agents are about basically personifying, a coworker, basically replacing you, right? And that's what's going to happen because they're going to be 1,000 times better than you. And a lot of people don't believe that right now. And they won't believe that because that's inconceivable in their brain, right? They can register it, they can see it, right? They can feel it, but it's not going to exist to them, right?
Yeah.
And this is the challenge that we're going to be dealing with in the near future. We're not talking 25 years from now, right? And you talked about what was interesting. You talked about the idea of these castes, these classes of people, right? The idea was to me was, okay, how are people going to try to fight back, right? What they're going to do is they're going to augment themselves with the intelligence, right? So they're going to plug in directly with the intelligence. Okay, they're going to have the brain, the operations and the chips and the interfaces put into their brain, and they're going to be a different society caste. Okay, they're going to be connected to the intelligence, the super intelligence, right? And there's going to be 90% of the population of the world will be struggling in poverty, and then there's going to be 10% of the world, and I'm going to say those numbers could be 1% or 99%, but that we don't know the exact. But there's going to be that thin veneer of personnel of people that are going to be basically controlling everything, connected to the super intelligence, right? And those people are going to be just fine, right? It's going to be the 90 or the 99% of the humanity that won't. And I'm sorry I'm being really negative about this, but I think people need to understand the impact of intelligence, right? The impact of super intelligence. And you take that and you put it in the model of, capitalism, and it's broken, right? The idea of capitalism used to be you have many different competitors, and those competitors will, the ones that do it will come to fruition and do really well, and you would have this really we'll call it vital and expanding and dynamic and organizational entity of economic vitality. It's not going to happen, right? It's broken, right? And this is what I want to say about this whole AI agent thing is don't do it, right? We should be pushing for as people who are, from a point of view of technology are pretty aware of what's going on. We should be pushing for augmentation only. The day a corporation replaces you with an AI agent is the day that corporation should be paying for 10 times an employee. Let's hit them at the finances. So if a corporation can turn around and say, well, I can hire 10 employees for one of these agents, right? They'll think twice, right? But a lot of people out there do not want that, right? A lot of people out there who are in charge of things do not want that. And I love technology. I actually want to see AGI. I want to see ASI. I want to see super intelligent helping humanity, right? But I don't want to see super intelligence supporting the 1% and having 99% of the population in poverty. I do not want to see that.
And that's certainly the direction it's going in, right? I mean, we talked about that in the last podcast about this sort of the power and the influence of the tech companies over, politics, over communication platforms over social media platforms. And now this sort of AI agent realm of things is going to even supercharge that even further, right? And it's going
Exactly.
to
Well, yeah.
allow them to, unleash workforces of these, sort of, bots or whatever you want to call them. Not just to in, the workplace, but within social platforms and other types of environments, right? And we haven't even gotten into that today, but I think the potential for that is pretty interesting. When you think about it, we're already kind of living in the Matrix to an extent, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I know the Matrix is science fiction and what have you, right? But we're
A lot
already
of people,
living
a
in
lot of
these.
people who listen to this might not even understand the Matrix. It is a little bit out there, right?
Yeah, it's like a computer simulation that everybody's existing within. They don't even know it, right? There's people that actually, like the flat earther type people that believe we're already living in a simulation, which is a whole other theory. Maybe we'll tackle that in a future podcast.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, though, we're already kind of living in a simulation when you think about a lot of our interactions through social platforms and even in the workplace, right? A lot of my daily life at work is sort of within a computerized, digital ecosystem, as it were, right? And yes, like we have calls where we're on video calls and I have, actually gone, my workplace is not too far, so I've gone to the office, I've met people. So I'm fully aware that I'm, working for a company of real people, but there's a lot of people that I've never been on a video call with or never interacted with in person. And oftentimes they'll go on calls and they're not even on camera. So I'm like, it's not that far of a leap that there might be an AI agent in that mix and that people wouldn't even know it initially. Now that may be sort of unethical, but it's not outside the realm of possibility that if it got convincing enough that you may not even know that. In fact, we talked about
Yeah.
programmers. In my experience, again, absolutely wonderful, kind, generous human beings, but oftentimes they're sort of on the introverted side of things. And my experience has been, for the most part, a lot of them don't come on camera and they're not, they're sort of like sitting behind a computer and they're interacting via chat and, tickets and things like that. But, for the most part, you might not ever see them. So it's not that far of a stretch. And I do think that's kind of going to be, in a sense, what happens, because if you live in this world, like we talked about in the last podcast, where you have this deregulation type thing, it's almost like they'll be kind of amongst us before maybe we even know, right? Is there a requirement, legal requirement that says if a company is using AI agents that it has to tell you that you're interacting with essentially an AI agent, right? Potentially not. So I think, between that and the idea of convenience and that, I think we're already in this place where we're really trusting AI and technology, although in some cases we're getting a bit exhausted with it to a point. But I think it's kind of like the frog boiling in water, right? And by the time we realize what's happening, it'll be too late. Like I said last time, you can't put that genie back in the bottle, and you're gonna have like a lot of potentially angry people, right?
Jason, I know you've been working with an AI to help you build some amazing songs around, our topics for this season.
Yeah, we're gonna have a theme song for every episode.
So basically, I'd like to see something that really represents the way, we're thinking about AI agents.
Well, I think with this week's song, I think we're really channeling your anger this week, Patrick. I think that's where we're at. I think you're ready to start a mosh pit in your office there. I think is what's going to happen.
When you face in the office, it's a metal smile. Clocking in with no overtime, no need to dial. Doesn't take a coffee break or miss a single day. Got the kind of work ethic that don't ever sway. Used to worry about deadlines in the Monday blues, but the shiny freight coating without any clues. Paper stacking high, but it don't even blink. think. Oh, hey, I'm a new co-worker. Always on time, never slower. No sick days, no vacations. Always working, no frustrations. Break room whispering about the new guy. Donuts disappear, but it's got no eye. Might be the perfect worker, but it's got no soul. Just one is in, see what's filling up its goal. Now we're all just dreaming of those lazy days. While it's crunching data in a million ways. Doesn't need a paycheck or a pat on the back. Just algorithms humming, never off track. Oh, hey, I'm a new co-worker. Always on time, never slower. No sick days, no vacations. Always working, no frustrations. Oh, hey, I'm a new co-worker. Always on time, never slower. No sick days, no vacations. Always working, no frustrations.
Oh,
Yeah. That is a killer, man.
Thank you for listening to the Probability Podcast. Please join us next time for more musings from the generator and the discriminator.